Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for another restful episode of true, scary stories to help you fall asleep. Today, we're going to be reading True Strangers Horror Stories. I hope you enjoy them. So, without further ado, lay back, relax, and enjoy these true, scary stories. Something weird happened to me. It was more scary in a what could have been kind of way, so not on the same scale as some of the other people in the comments. I was a 17-year-old and I'm male, and I was walking home from a nightclub, quite drunk and stoned at about 2 a.m. I'm in a lonely part of my walk. No people and very few cars. Just a road and some large shops. A barbecue and a carpet showroom. Out-of-town shopping complexes that have since become ubiquitous in the UK. Anyway, in a lay-by, about 15 feet away, is a car pulled up with lights on. As I stumble past, two men step out and call me over. Something about the situation immediately sobers me up. I keep walking, and one of them shouts, "It's fine, we're the police. We'll drive you home." I stop for a moment and reply with a smart comment along the lines of how police would never do this and that they were dodgy. Calling them dodgy always sticks in my mind. He insists that I'm too drunk and it's not safe for a young man like me, and I should let them take me home. I say no, and he then calls me to come over here and listen to the police radio in the car to prove that they are real police. It's weird the guy is almost begging me, desperation in his voice. I repeat a firm no, tell them I'm fine and keep walking. The minute I'm out of sight, I run as fast as I can and don't relax until the 30 minutes later that I'm home. I can only assume that they didn't manhandle me into the car because there was the very occasional taxi passing by. I'm 45 now and occasionally think about how that could have ended for me. None of the scenarios seem good. Sadly, stories like this are probably more routine for women, but at the time, it really shook me up. I was around 10 years old. I was at school, but my mom told me that she was thinking of taking me to the doctor's in the afternoon. I had a recurring eye issue. It was lunchtime, and I'm in the dining hall when the office woman told me there was a taxi outside for me and that I needed to go. I assumed that my mom booked it for me, as she can't drive. I cleared up my stuff and got my bag. I was just about to leave when I remembered my jacket in my classroom. I rush to get it and head out for the taxi. The office woman tells me that I'm too late and the taxi had gone without me. I just went back to class, but I was panicking that my mom would be angry at me. School finishes and my mom is waiting for me at the gates. I burst into tears, apologizing for missing the taxi and thinking that I was in big trouble. She never ordered a taxi and had no clue what I was thinking about. She ended up not making the doctor appointment. No one ever found out who ordered the taxi or who the driver was. My mom doesn't like to think what would have happened if I hadn't forgotten my jacket and got in that taxi. When I was about 18, my friend and I went to the movies and decided to walk home. It was a bit of a walk, but we didn't want to pay for a cab. I'm always pretty vigilant when walking, especially at night, so I noticed a guy with his hood up walking behind us. Every so often, I'd look over my shoulder and check on him. He started pretty far behind us, but was gaining ground weirdly quickly. The last time I turned my head, I caught him sprinting at us. I panic and tell my friend to run for it. She's in those Birkenstock slip-on sandals that were popular back then, and she's struggling to run, so I'm dragging her until we get to the gas station. I bang on the window and beg the clerk to let us in, but he says he can't because it's past a certain time at night. But he promises if the guy comes near us that he'll call the cops. The guy comes down the hill, through the gas station, staring at us the entire time. I swear, the only reason that he thought better of it was because the gas clerk had the phone visibly in his hand. Plus, he was a big guy. I completely broke down after he left. Just the thought that he was running at us while I had my back turned scares the heck out of me. What if I didn't turn? When I did, that last time. I was camping with my family and our family friends. The parents get toasted during the night, and my friend, her cousin, and I get to camp out in a tent while everyone else is in campers. After the parents are passed out and the fires died off, we're just talking and slowly calming down for sleep. It was probably around midnight or so. We hear the crunch of some shoes on gravel and the jingle of a collar on a leash. A soft shadow of a tall man stops by the side of our tent, facing closest to the gravel road. We are all stone silent, and a man's soft voice says, "Hey there, girlies." We say nothing, in the stillest silence I've ever experienced. "What are you girls up to so late?" Silence. We're looking at each other with wide eyes, thinking we're essentially on our own, because the campers, while being close by, are filled with our smaller siblings and our intoxicated, snoring parents. He hums something to himself, like he's mulling something over, and then his shadow moves and he continues on down the road. Was he probably just some drunk guy walking his dog? Likely. But was that the scariest experience of my young life, and the first time that I realized that in a situation like that, I didn't have the right instinct? Yes, it was. 2 hours later, the cousin had to use the bathroom, and by then we'd calmed down a little bit. But it was the most paranoid sprinting to the outhouses up the road that I'd ever had. I'm a guy, and when I was 19, I was at a friend's apartment one night for a party. Things were starting to wrap up. It was very late, and we were all standing around in the parking lot, talking as we got ready to leave. Then this beat-up old Ford Bronco pulls into the lot, and a tall, lanky guy in Western garb, hat, boots, belt buckle, gets out. That in itself wasn't unusual. I'm in New Mexico, and you see people dressed like that all the time. But instead of going into an apartment, he walks up to our group and just stands there. Never says a word. He wasn't acting in a threatening way. It was just really weird and awkward. So we all decided this would be a good time to leave. We got in our cars. He got in his Bronco and we all drove off. When I got onto the street, he pulled out right behind me, which I didn't think too much of at first. But then he revved his engine, pulled right up on my tail, and flipped on his high beams and a light bar. Now I knew something was up. At the time, I was driving a little 1985 Dodge Omni that could maybe do 75 if you dropped it off a cliff. So there was no way in heck that I was going to outrun a V8 Ford Bronco, even if I was crazy enough to try. This guy could easily keep up with me. I didn't know what to do. In retrospect, I probably should have driven to a police station, but that never occurred to me. And even if it did, I don't know if I would have known where the nearest police station was. This was the early 90s, no smartphones or Google Maps. So I did the only thing that I could think of. I swerved onto a side street into a poorly lit residential neighborhood. He followed me, but I had a bit of a head start, so I gunned it and turned off my lights. I just sort of randomly drove around the neighborhood for a while, until even I couldn't remember what route I had taken, and I couldn't see him in the mirror anymore. When I was pretty confident that I had lost him, I found my way to a main road, turned my lights back on, and headed home. To this day, I don't know if I was the victim of a stupid drunken prank or if I was nearly murdered. My younger sister had a similar experience when I was 12. It was Halloween, and my mom had taken us trick-or-treating around our street. When we got back home, we asked if we could stay out a bit longer riding our bikes. We lived in a cul-de-sac, so it was normally only neighbors and their visitors driving by. After a short ride around, just as we had stopped in our driveway, a car stopped, and a man told us get in the car. My sister and I froze out of fear and didn't respond. He repeated the demand before driving away. I guess he was worried an adult would see or come outside. We rushed inside, locked the garage behind us. The police were called and came to our house to take the details. We even spotted a car that looked very similar after the incident at the nearby shops, and my mom informed the police. A few months later, we came to find out that the man who approached us had been arrested for luring a young child away and assaulting the child during Christmas carols at a local botanical park, which my family and I had also attended. I remember being shocked and disturbed when I first found out about the assault, and even more so when I realized that what could have happened to me or my sister that Halloween night, when we found out that it was the same man that was responsible. My mom always told me to not approach or talk to strangers. One day when I was walking home from elementary school from the bus stop, which was around the corner and down a block, an older man drove up to me. I was on the right side of the road, and he was driving towards me and parked next to me. So he was on the wrong side of the road in a residential neighborhood. He had a map in his hand and asked me if I could tell him where this street was, as he pointed at the map. I took a couple of steps towards the car and remembered the lesson that my mom had taught me and stopped and asked, "What street is it?" He told me the name of the street, and I gave him verbal directions and started walking again. Something didn't seem right to me though, and I don't get why he needed a map to ask where a street was that was not difficult to find. I was literally a few miles down the main road, a block away. I just figured he wanted to kidnap me. This happened when I was little, around 6 or 7. I was being watched by the neighbors across the street with her 4-year-old and newborn. The mom decided we should have a picnic on the driveway, but after a little while, she had to go inside to get something, maybe to use the bathroom. I can't really remember. But as soon as she left, this old couple rolls up to the driveway and asks me and the 4-year-old for directions. I tried to tell her the street was a few streets over, but she said that she couldn't hear me over the car, so could we come closer? I wasn't sure what to do, because I already knew about stranger danger but didn't want to be rude to elders. Luckily, right then, the neighbor's mom came sprinting out and talked to them. I overheard the ladies say that I was helpful, telling them that they were on the wrong street, and the neighbor told her the same thing I did. It was only when I was older, thinking back on it, that I realized that it was weird that they asked such a small child for directions, and that she had heard what I said, but lied, trying to get me to come closer. Definitely, probably would have been kidnapped. Back in Sweden, I was casually walking back from an after school club, probably around 7 to 8 years old. I can't remember for certain. Autumn weather, rainy and dark. A car pulls up next to me, drives slowly. A relatively old man looks me dead in the eye. I look straight ahead. I start walking a bit faster and he speeds up. Instinctively, I turn around and frantically start running towards the main road. It's about a 30-minute walk from school to my house. Anyway, as I run along the main road, one of our neighbors sees my reflective dangly bit, stops and offers me a ride back home. It shook me up for weeks after, but my parents didn't care. I was in Walmart with my dad, probably around 6 years old, and I had just walked to the door while he was checking out. I was an impatient child and had trouble simply waiting for any length of time. A young boy, I suspected maybe a year or two older than me, approached. I was too young to be terribly suspicious, so I went along with it when he struck up conversation. He eventually asked if I was here with someone, and I said that my dad was just over there. He then forcefully grabbed my wrist and told me to come with him, trying to ultimately pull me towards the door. I was thankfully able to free myself, and I ran away. Shortly thereafter, my dad came up and we left. It could have been nothing, just some kid being stupid. But with all the stories of kids being kidnapped and trafficked, it's terrifying to consider what could have happened. I remember when I was 11, I was walking across the road to grab some candy with my friend. We lived in townhouses and were neighbors. So this happened right in front of our building. This pasty bald ginger dude comes up to us as we're waiting at the light and says to me, "You're my older sister's name, sister, right? Want to make $1,000? All you have to do is take a few pictures." I managed to choke out a no while turning to my friend, who's equally terrified, her eyes on the light waiting for it to change. As soon as the light switched, we bolted to the store and hung out there for a little bit. Broad daylight, busy arterial road for the city. 5 minutes later, it was like it never happened. Around August of 1978, I was in my late teens hitchhiking from Illinois to Michigan. I caught a ride on Route 94 outside of Chicago with a middle-aged man in a pickup truck. He was a nice enough guy, friendly and talkative. A half hour or so into the ride, I happened to glance at his crotch and noticed that he had his zipper open with his junk on full display. Not good. I stayed calm and waited until we got near an exit and asked him nicely to pull off. I told him I was getting car sick. He ignored me and blew past the exit. Crap. There was another exit a few miles ahead. I told him I was nauseous and was going to vomit and to please take the next exit. He blew past that one too, and I instantly recognized the danger that I was in. I knew I had to get out of the truck. All I could do was bluff. I'd seen it once in a movie. I reached into my backpack and pretended to grab something and hold it in my hand inside the backpack. I told him that it was in his best interest to drop me off. I told him that if he didn't drop me off, I would use the thing in my hand, and that would be very bad for both of us. It worked. He must have figured I wasn't worth the trouble. He took the next exit and dropped me off at a gas station. Fast forward to several months later when I picked up a newspaper and saw a picture of the man who had picked me up hitchhiking on the front page. He had been arrested, suspected in the murders of multiple young men. That is the creepiest face I've ever seen, and I never hitchhike again. I've had a few, but due to my age at the time, this one sticks out. I was 20 and heading back to my car from buying groceries. This weird guy in this van beside me starts leaning out of his driver's side window and starts asking me about the books in my back seat. You must be in college. I saw the books. I remember taking those classes. I hate causing a scene, so I just said, "Yeah, I just started not too long ago." I try and get to my car, but he's leaning half out the window to get as close to me as he possibly can. I'm trying to get around him, but there's nowhere to go without having to walk by him. He then sees my t-shirt and starts talking about the band on it. He likes this band. It's really cool, etc., etc. I say thanks for the chat, but I really must be going. He says something about knowing which school I go to and that he likes my bumper stickers. They really stand out. I finally finagle myself around him, get to my car, and drive off. He follows me for a bit, so I just drive in random circles in the area until he disappears. That messed with me for a little bit. My neighbor at the time told me next time to get his description and his license plate. There's been a creep in the area making attempted kidnappings that they're trying to catch. Thankfully, I was overweight, so he'd have a hard time wrangling me. This could only happen to one of my friends, who is one of the sweetest people that I've ever met. Where we live, there's a suburb that has all the nightclubs and some tech businesses, but still has a large homeless presence. So over the years, it's developed a bad reputation. One night, my friend is heading towards a gig and takes a shortcut through a dark alley, where out of nowhere, an Aboriginal guy asks him for a cigarette. My friend, being the nice guy he is, rolls him one and just starts having a conversation with the bloke. An Aboriginal woman approaches my friend from behind and puts her hands on his shoulders, but doesn't say anything. The guy my friend is talking to nods like he's saying no, so the girl just leaves. My friend says he has to go, which the Aboriginal guy replies, "You know, I was actually going to R-word you, but you turned out to be a nice guy, so I decided I wouldn't." My mate just legged it. When I was 10 years old, I was watching television in the living room, around 11 to 12 noon. The door was open, and suddenly, a guy with somewhat long and curly hair, and really tall too, stands right at our door. I asked him, "Do you need anything, sir? Are you looking for my mom?" He didn't say anything. He just stared at me and shook his head a little. I keep asking. He stayed silent. My brother, who was 11 or 12 years old, is in the living room too, so I go to our kitchen where my mom is doing something. "Mom, there's a guy at our door," I said to her. When my mom turned her head towards me, she got startled. I turned around to see the guy standing right behind me, and I didn't even hear his footsteps. Mom then started yelling things like, "Who are you?" and other stuff that I couldn't remember. My brother was standing frozen in the living room. Our neighbor's house is just beside our house, so my mother runs towards the exit at the kitchen and shouts for help. The guy leaves before our neighbors arrive. He was fast, and he wasn't even running. My neighbor, who was probably 20 plus years old at the time, even tried looking for him and tried to scan the streets, but no one saw him. That was the creepiest guy I've ever encountered. I was pumping gas while driving home after a round of golf with friends. I wasn't particularly aware of my surroundings because I'd been to this gas station many times. All of a sudden, and out of nowhere, a middle-aged man asked if I know where the church is from the pump across the aisle. Puzzled because there are so many churches in this area, I ask for clarification. He then starts asking me with increasing angst if I accept Jesus and whether I know Jesus. My hair is standing on end at this point, so I start babbling about how I love Jesus. Then he says, "Come on over here and let me show you something." Then I finally get a good look at this situation. This crazy person is driving a 1980s to 1990s faux wood station wagon with curtains all around the rear windows. I had a car with a V8 at the time, so when the guy turned around, I threw the gas handle on the hook, jumped in my car, and got out as quickly as I could. I took a circuitous route home at fairly high speed just in case. So I'm pretty sure he was either going to help me meet Jesus that day or show off the body of someone who already did. Either way, not a good situation to be in. My sister and I were playing outside when we were younger, and an elderly couple was walking by our yard. Our yard had a cemetery in the back, so it was quite a common local attraction for tourists, as this house was built in the 1800s, and most of the graves were from children who died back then from the flu, etc. There were some creepy stories from that place, but nothing lives up to what happened all those years ago. As we were playing outside, this couple kept pestering my sister about what her name was. As they approached us and got closer, we were just little kids and got terribly scared and ran inside and told our mom what had happened. The following week, I heard a story on the news about an elderly couple approaching a teenage girl, kidnapping her and R-wording her. And it was the same couple that had approached my sister and I. I still get creeped out about that. In college, one of my friends, Matt, really wanted this cheap IKEA cabinet thing for his gamer setup that someone was advertising in one of the campus apartments near his place. We were going somewhere with our other mutual friend, Chris, and he swung by to get the cabinet on the way there. We get to the apartment, and the guys go in and I'm in the car. They come back out after viewing the cabinet and brought the seller with them. My friends were clearing out the trunk, and the seller was hanging around my window trying to talk to me. He was really weird, so I was just giving one-worded answers. He kept asking if I wanted to come upstairs to see his fish tank. No, and I politely declined several times. He had these shifty black eyes that creeped me out. Like, I'm sure his eyes were brown, but they were super dark and beady. I'm pretty sure he might have been tweaking off of something. Then he kept showing off his sinewy arms and bragging about weightlifting. Dude looked like a shaved bird, so I don't know why he thought I'd believe that he regularly lifted 300 pounds or whatever. They all eventually go back inside to get the cabinet, and a while later I see Chris holding the door to the apartment building open and waiting for Matt and the seller to bring it downstairs. All of a sudden, I see Chris freak out and run inside. I got out of the car and ran over. Matt was at the bottom of the stairs with the cabinet on his leg. It was lightweight, so at best the fall hurt him the most. The seller was standing in the middle of the stairs nonchalantly. We were fussing over our friend when the seller realized that the appropriate human emotion he should be displaying was concern. It was creepy seeing him just stand there all blank-faced, and then having this light bulb moment like, all right, look concerned, say something nice. The seller was like, oh no, are you okay? Matt said that he was fine, and then him and Chris just took the cabinet outside and put it in the car. I was picking up a piece of the cabinet that broke off on the stairs when the creepy guy basically teleported behind me and stroked my arm. He said that I absolutely super totally needed to see his fish tank collection now. And I said, no sir, goodbye. Matt didn't mention being shoved until later, but I was obviously already getting sketchy vibes from the seller, so I fully believe him. Apparently, they were both holding the cabinet and going down the stairs. Matt was walking backwards down the stairs, while Weirdo Guy was at the other end. Matt swears to this day that the man looked at him in the eye and shoved the cabinet into his chest and watched him fall backwards with it. He said that the shove happened after the seller asked if he partied, and Matt said not really. He refers to him as the party pusher and thinks the story is hilarious in hindsight. I still think it's terrifying. When I was a kid, my dad owned a houseboat and a speedboat. My big brother and I would spend a good chunk of our summers with him. Anyways, this was in Southern California, and there were all these waterways with tiny islands in them. There was a party going on one, and my dad took us. It was more of an adult party and I was only 12, so I just wandered off and did my own thing, played in the water and whatever. There was a tiny peninsula next to the docks, which was serving as additional parking. I went to go get some ice cream from the guy selling it out of a cart, and was walking back when I heard someone calling out. I look over and see a dude in a boat, probably in his mid-30s, calling and waving to me. I kinda watched him for a second because I was often wrong about these things. I thought that maybe he meant it for someone else. But no, he was waving me over and trying to get me to come onto his boat. A 12-year-old girl who looked 12 at the most. By the time I had fetched my dad and my brother to confront the guy, he was gone. Wish I had maybe hustled more. I have very little doubts as to what would have happened to me had I gotten onto the boat. Anyways, this was also around the time, unbeknownst to me at the time, that they had pulled a mummified lady out of an old refrigerator. Scary things happened in that area. I was 8 or 9 years old, I think, and we had a little field, mostly just sand, on the opposite side of the street where I played a lot. One day I was sitting there with a friend, building some sand castles or whatever, and suddenly an old guy came towards us. I have to say that this street was on a hill, and very quiet most of the time, since it was only used by our neighbors and other people that lived there, rarely some joggers or people with their dogs. He asked us if we would know the way to an old playground that he used to visit as a child somewhere in the area. There was no playground anywhere near my street, so we tried to explain to him that there's no playground here, but he insisted that it was there, somewhere, and asked us to join him so that we could find it together. I don't know why, but my friend was being very friendly to him, while I was thinking about running over to my mom as soon as I could tell her. And then she said yes. So he actually grabbed her hand and started walking with her towards another street that was also next to the field. I tried to stop her multiple times while she was getting up, and he was starting to get very sassy towards me, almost mocking me because I wouldn't get to see the great playground and that I'm a horrible friend. When they were starting to walk away, I immediately jumped up, ran over which he had seen, and told my mom, who then called the cops. We both ran out again trying to find my friend. After a short while, we saw her approaching us, alone, from the street that they both went to. She seemed very confused. She then told us that after a short distance, he said that he had to go in a bush for a few seconds, and then didn't come back. Me and my mom were crying and hugging her, while she still didn't really understand what the problem was there. The police came but didn't find anyone, so we described him and they wrote it down, but he never came back or was seen by any one of our neighbors. I still get goosebumps thinking about what could have happened. This actually happened to me, so I'm going to be a little vague for the sake of privacy. I've never wanted to give much of a crap about things, so I used to give hitchhikers and strangers rides if it looked like they could use it. One day I'm in my driveway washing my car before I leave for class at college, and I see a sketchy looking guy walking down my street. I don't live in the best neighborhood, and there are several bad neighborhoods pretty close by, so being wary isn't unwarranted. He's wearing weird clothes. They look like cheap, badly cleaned dress clothes. A white button-up shirt, sleeves unbuttoned, black wrinkled slacks, and a scuffed, old battered black briefcase. He had a shaved head and looked scrawny, like he had been starving somewhere. When he got nearby, he asked if I could give him a lift, and I got a weird vibe from him, but I said sure. I asked where he needed to go, and he said somewhere vague and told me that he would give me the directions and it wasn't far. Asked me if I would stop at a local liquor store. I do, and he gets a beer and some cigarettes and offers me both, but I decline, then take him to his destination. On the way there, he explains that today was his first day out of jail after having served 3 years. I didn't know what to say, so I congratulated him, and he thanked me and swigged on his beer. Destination was a well-known hangout for gang members, right on the edge of an especially bad neighborhood. I pull in and drop him off, and he thanks me and leaves. Now, about 5 years later, I see him again. Same guy, impossible to mistake him. He still looked the same, only like he had been fed better, less scrawny. He was on the witness stand at a murder trial. A murder that took place at the very place that I dropped him off about 3 weeks later. Chances are good that he stayed there from the time that I dropped him off and never left. He testified against the people who did the murder. They were gang members, part of a gang that he was a member of before he went to jail. He's lived in hiding since the trial. The person murdered would have been a member of my family through marriage if he hadn't been murdered. He was the only person to testify against them. I had goosebumps during the entire trial, the day that he testified. When I was around 18, one of my friends lived in a house about 3 miles outside of the village that my friends and I lived in. It was right next to a motorway/freeway and had a large amount of land attached to it. His parents ran a horse stable in one of the attached fields. His parents had gone on holiday, and we were planning on having a small party at his house. About 20 to 30 people. A few of us met up at the village and walked through the country roads up to his house, which took about 30 minutes. When we got there, we found 2 police cars parked in the drive. We all thought that the party had started, and for whatever reason, the cops had gotten called. Turns out that the friend who lived there had been eating dinner, waiting for people to turn up, when he noticed someone standing at the bottom of the garden, just out of range of the porch light, watching him. Thinking that it was just one of us messing with him, he slipped out the side door in an attempt to get behind whoever it was and surprise them instead. After sneaking around and not being able to find the person, he headed back expecting us to be there, waiting only to look through the kitchen window and see an unknown man sitting in his kitchen, finishing the dinner that he had been eating. Apparently, he looked dirty, unkempt, and basically like a tramp. My friend noped out, ran a mile to his nearest neighbor, and called the police. When they turned up, they searched the house and property with dogs, but couldn't find anyone. It seriously freaked him out. Several of us ended up staying at his for a week until his parents got back. I'm sure I'll sound crazy, but I'm super creeped out from a recent interaction at a grocery store. I was shopping with my toddler, and an older lady, maybe 70-ish, who was by herself, just came up and said, "Ma'am, do you know all the canned veggies are in sale for 50 cents this week?" And went on about how it's a great deal and they don't run it often. I said, "Thanks, I appreciate the heads up, and I'll definitely grab a few on my way out." Then she begins to walk away, and it's almost out of sight when she stopped and looked back and smiled at my son. She then asked how old he was. I said, "Oh, just over a year." She then asked if he was my only child, and some other random questions about him. Then she goes, "Hey, I just remembered, I have some clothes in my trunk, all boy stuff in the 2T to 3T range," and asked if I wanted it. I politely declined. I said we'll be shopping a while, and I didn't want to hold her up. She then proceeds to say, "Oh, not a problem. I'll just wait outside, and then I can come back and find you before you leave. Are you a single mom? Would you need them?" I got this gut feeling that something was off about this lady, and I just said, "Nope, not a single mom, and we have all the clothes that we need," and then thanked her for the offer. She tried a few more times, saying things like, "I just don't know what to do with them. If you could use them, I'd be happy to give them all to you." At this point, it really felt like she was trying to lure me and my son to her car. I continued to decline the offer and then walked away. I did a few more laps around the store looking for things that I needed, and at one point I saw her standing in an aisle in the center of the store with a younger man just people watching. I could just be super paranoid, and she was just a sweet old lady trying to be nice. But something in my head just told me to get out of the conversation as quickly as possible. I feel like parents will know that having a small child makes strangers talk to you all the time and want to make small talk about your sweet kiddos. But this conversation did not feel the same as the others I've had while out with my son. Has anyone had a similar experience? Two years ago, I lived near a big city while taking care of my great-grandma. One day, me and my mom decided to get some groceries, but we didn't have a car, so we had to walk. When we were almost to the local King Soopers, I heard my first name being shouted. I ignored it at first, thinking I was hearing things, but then this random lady, who looked pretty disheveled and scared, ran up to me and grabbed my arms and kept repeating my name. My name is not a common name, and everyone that I know calls me by a completely unrelated nickname. So there was no way she heard someone else say my name. She looked so frightened, and I will never be able to get her face out of my mind. She was holding onto my arms with this really tight grip, and I remember being surprised because she was very skinny and frail looking. Her grip left bruises on my arms for a while. My mom ended up grabbing my arm and dragging me away. She was freaked out too, but didn't say anything. She just kept praying. When I got home, she prayed a lot and blessed me. I was not scared of her, just more confused. How did she know my name? And why did she look so scared? When I was 13, I was at the Goodwill with my mom. We went to pay for our items, and there was an older man at the cash register. He gave me a weird look that made me uncomfortable. Just as he's finished ringing up everything, and when my mom was momentarily distracted by paying, he looks at me and quietly says, "Smile." And even though I was confused and creeped out, I smiled, and in an instant he retrieved a Polaroid camera from under the register and took a photo. Then, just as quickly as he took it, he put it out back under the counter. My mom noticed the flash and the confused look on my face, but the cashier acted as if nothing happened. It happened so fast and was so weird, we just looked at him in shock and left. When we got to the car, my mom asked, did he just take a picture of you?" And I just nodded my head. We didn't know what to think, so we just kind of tried to forget about it. Still creeps me out thinking that this man probably has my photo, and who knows how many other people's photos. So when some stranger says smile, just don't. This happened a few days ago, whilst I was on my way home from visiting my friend's house. I was driving on a back road late at night in my Tesla Model 3 while it was on auto drive. I'll admit that I was not paying attention to the road, and I was on my phone while I had my music in the car playing. The ride was okay and chill for a while, but I'm not really sure because I was not paying attention at the time. Out of nowhere, my car immediately braked and made an alarming sound. I was scared and immediately took control of the wheel and looked through the windshield. When I looked, I saw a figure standing inches from my car, barely avoiding being hit. My heart was racing for the impact, and now seeing what I could only assume to be a person. They didn't even flinch from the sight of almost being hit. I looked at them for a good 10 seconds before I put my car in park and turned on the megaphone to ask them if they're okay. They didn't respond and proceeded to walk near my window. I locked my doors while they're approaching because I was terrified. They asked me if I could roll the window down to speak to them, but I refused and told them that I could hear them from the other side. I then asked why they're out here all alone in the cold, and they told me that their car had broken down and that they were hoping that someone would stop to help them. As they were talking, I got a good look at their face, and they appeared to be 25 to 30. They also asked me my name, and I told them that my name was Rebecca. They told me their name was Ashton. After that small talk they attempted, I told them that I would be calling someone to come assist them with their situation. They weren't happy with that, and instead asked that I drop them off to a friend's house who lived nearby. That's when I become really freaked out and suspicious. They had told me that they were waiting for someone, and now they need to be dropped off. I put my car back into drive and told them again, from the window since megaphone is not available in park, that I would call someone to come help them. They then tried to reach for the door handle, but I guess they forgot that Tesla handles are embedded into the car. When they did that, I immediately stepped on the pedal and went flying down the road. I didn't even look into my rearview mirror or put the car back into autopilot. The whole ride back I was scared. I got back onto a main road where I would hope to see cars and just floored at home. I couldn't get my mind off of it for the rest of the night. I have suspicions that the guy was not alone and that there was other people with them. I pray that they didn't get someone else who wasn't as lucky as me. I will never in my life stop to help some random person ever again. I was in a different city for placement. I was going inside Morrison's, and the security guy at the front was saying hi to everyone, and he was sometimes saying bonjour. The old man started speaking in French with him, and I said bonjour back to the security guy. The old man heard, then asked me if I could speak French, and I said yes. He started asking me some questions like, "What's your name?" and "What are you doing in this city?" Stupid as I am, I gave him my real name and said that I was here for placement in this hospital. We said bye to each other and didn't think about it anymore. This happened on a Wednesday. I went back to the hospital on Tuesday. My supervisor came and gave me a letter. The letter had my name and what I do in the hospital. I opened it, and it was a letter from the old man. By the way, when I say old, I mean old. He looked older than my granddad. The old man was saying that he had a good conversation and wanted to meet up with me to have a drink, and it was his number and email address. I was a bit freaked out to go back to Morrison's from that day, and from that day I tend to give fake names to strangers. I thank God he wasn't like a mad person, because he basically knew where to find me if he wanted to. So guys, don't be stupid like me, and never give your name and what you do or where you work or live to strangers. Stay safe, everyone. Just after 1 a.m., I was sitting in my living room watching Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, browsing Reddit. The most boring Saturday night ever. And then someone's knocking. I live with my brother, and there's a guy who visits him sometimes, so I assumed it was him and just opened the door. But there was this random man in his 40s, looking kinda sus, saying, "Sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm looking for a taxi place." So I said town center, and he keeps apologizing, asking if he woke the kids. He's also very close to my door. I don't have any kids, but I said yes, hoping that he'd leave. I was scared that if I tried to close the door, he'd push in. I got so anxious I started shaking, and he goes about that taxi again and says, "Can I ask you a question? I got divorced yesterday. You're beautiful." And a car was coming up, so I said thanks. You know, I tried to be polite so he wouldn't get angry and aggressive. And I shut the door and I just stood by the window to make sure that he was gone. Jesus, how was I so stupid? It could have ended badly, especially that I live in a really crappy area and my brother wears headphones all the time. Why was he asking about kids? To see if I was alone? And he went in the direction the car was coming, so I don't know if it was a random car or someone picking him up. I don't know if he was a thief or just drunk, and I had the lights on, so he knocked. I really hope it's just that. I really hope that I start thinking before doing anything else. Also, I wish I could get a gun. It's just not an option where I live. Also, it was nice to get it off my chest, even though y'all did not make me feel any safer. Thank you for the kind comments and tips. I'm a female, and this story took place when I was 12. It's more than half my lifespan ago, but I still get really uneasy when thinking back to it. I tried to block it from my mind and guess as to what could have happened if not for two kind strangers. I was walking home from school one day. It's a 4-kilometer walk along a busy road. I was walking alone, however. At one of the intersections I crossed, there was a tall, dirty-looking man that noticed me. I would guess his age was early 30s. Being a kid back then, I struggled telling the age of the adults. He started following me and trying to strike up a conversation. He kept telling me that I was beautiful and that he wants us to be friends. He asked me where I live and if my parents would be home. He asked me so many questions that I tried to just shrug him off and be polite. I didn't answer any of his questions, just increased the pace at which I walked. When we were nearing the block on which I lived, I started becoming really uneasy. He wanted to follow me home and I did not want him to. He gave off a weird vibe because adults did not usually speak to me that way. The only way I could get rid of him would be to give him my cell phone number and agree to answer when he calls. Because this situation made me uncomfortable, I gave him a fake number and hightailed it out of there. A few months passed without me running into that man again, so I completely put this out of my mind. He was probably just some random weirdo. However, as you can guess from here, things did not stay that way. One day, approximately 4 months later, I found myself walking home after school again. I will admit that I wasn't paying much attention to my surroundings. That was until I heard what sounded like footsteps running up behind me. I reflexively turned to look around, and it was that same creepy man that I had encountered before. He slowed his pace as he reached me, but was yelling the entire time. He figured out that I had given him the wrong number, and he was furious. He kept yelling and yelling that I think that I'm better than him. That is why I gave him a fake number. I was terrified in that moment, as he was very angry. I was afraid that he was going to hurt me, but couldn't grab the attention of any motorists. I speed walked to the closest petrol station, which was luckily not too far, with him following behind me, still yelling the entire time. When I got to the petrol station, I immediately got the attention of two burly men standing next to their pickup truck. They must have seen the terrified look on my face, plus the man following me, as they immediately ran over to ask if I was all right. I was too scared to speak, just shook my head frantically as I tried to get behind them. They immediately demanded to know why the man was following me. He fed them some crap line about being my brother. I just silently kept shaking my head. I guess they figured out what was happening at this point, as they started yelling at the man, accusing him of something. I didn't stay to find out. I took the opportunity of him being distracted to start running away. The man noticed that I was leaving and tried to take off after me. The burly men really took offense to this, as they immediately tackled him and threw him in the back of their pickup. He was screaming at this point. They sped off with the guy at an inconceivable speed right past me and just kept going. I was happy that they took him away, but I did not stop running until I reached home. I had no idea what to make of this entire exchange, but it really shook me. I do not know where they took the creepy guy or what they did with him after. In all honesty, I don't want to know. I told my parents and altered the route that I walked home from school. I never saw him again, and I'm thankful for that. Even though I could not say what I needed in the moment, those two kind strangers saw that I was in distress and dealt with it for me. Even after all these years, I still remember the sheer terror and then relief when they took him away. Thank you so much for listening to all of the stories in this video. I hope you enjoyed them. I also hope that you enjoy the extra rain at the end. Get a good night's sleep, everyone, and I'll read to you in the next video. Bye-bye now.